Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We're going to get you all caught up in our midweek show with everything, injuries, all of the comings and goings on the roster that you've heard about. We're going to talk about those things in detail. We're also going to get into some of the past. and Keith's vehemently is arguing in favor of revisiting the All-22 film from the game, and I have not been able to put up an argument against him, and so we're gonna go back and revisit that slugfest again, and go over some of those key plays that were a difference in this game. There were more than just a few key plays. They were talking about an entire half. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, despite having to rewatch the All-22 earlier today. So I'd say I'm that was a marathon, but I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, no, really. Got my daughter's birthday's tomorrow, so we're gonna be going out and celebrating that. Of course, she chose one of the most expensive restaurants in Phoenix to do that with all of our friends and family. So we'll see what my contribution to that event is. Fun nonetheless. Going to a show on Friday night here locally, just kind of purging this Seahawks week out of my system before I get back into it this weekend. And I'm, believe it or not, I'm looking forward to that Lions game, because one of the best medicine that you can take for getting a bad thing out of your system is just go right up and do it again and hopefully do it better. So at least that's my hope anyway, my internal optimist side of me. But we're here to talk about the loss, but also the injuries that the two critical injuries that happened and how it's affecting the roster. The team announced today, Wednesday, that it is placing Abraham Lucas on injured reserve. And that means that he's going to miss at least 4 games. Now, Pete came out just yesterday and said, Abe's fighting kind of a knee thing he's had going on for a while. It's not a new injury, blah, 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 blah. Today he's on injured reserve. That doesn't completely add up to me, but maybe they reached a point where they thought that he could be better long-term, obviously, by sitting out a few games and really just kind of resting that thing up and allowing it to heal to a point where he can come back and have a great effective season. Otherwise it was just going to be, this reoccurring thing happening over and over again. So they're kind of rolling the dice with that a little bit.
Also compounding it is the Charles Cross injury, because now they're missing both tackles, which means you got to make a roster move. You've got to bring in some other people in order to fill out the roster. And to do that, you have to make room. And if Lucas was going to be out, let's see, even if it was going to be out 3 games, they thought before he came back, it's only one more, but to put him on IR, and they were able to create a roster spot.
Yeah, and we have a bye week after that game too, so he's able to rest for almost 6 weeks here.
Yeah. So
yeah, and so and so the Charles Cross thing is a turf toe, and that can be complicated, especially for a bigger guy. And those things vary in severity, and it really kind of depends on pain tolerance as well. It's very difficult to push off on an injury like that. Okung, our left tackle, about 10 years ago, had a turf toe, and he missed 8 weeks. So this is something that the team is going to just have to evaluate and try to figure out. There's no guarantees that he's going to play in this game. Probably likely won't. And so the Seahawks went out and made some moves, and started that with signing veteran left tackle, and veteran is is
An
not even
understatement.
an understatement, right? Jason Peters, 41 years old, been around. Started out as an undrafted guy. I mean, good for him. All pro, 9-time Pro Bowler. Most people remember him with the Philadelphia Eagles for a long time. Moved around a little bit. Last year, he was with Dallas. Took about 120 snaps last year. Didn't play a lot. When he did, he was okay. I think he allowed 7 or 8 pressures, 1 sack. It's just a placeholder, but it's a veteran guy that comes in, maybe adds to the room as far as having that veteran presence and so forth. And then he's likely to start like this next week if he's ready to go physically. He might be in part of a rotation, but I think he's going to end up playing just because the Seahawks really don't have a lot of other choices here, and they're going to face one of the best edge rushing teams in the NFL in the Lions.
Yeah, and that's really the problem. I don't know if he'll start, but I do think they'll rotate him in, get him some reps just to help him like work in so that he can start the following week. But you're running out Jake Curran and Stone Forsythe as your tackles if he doesn't play. And we saw that in the second half this last week. It wasn't pretty. Having one of those guys in there is something that I think you can work around, especially if it's Curran because of his run blocking. But when you have both, there's just not enough. You can't keep enough tight ends in to help with protection and still have people get open, because if you keep 2 tight ends in to help, well, now you've got 3 guys out in patterns and 6 or 7 guys covering them. It just doesn't work. And so it's an interesting situation for him. So like I said, they had to make a move. They just really didn't have any option there. You could do worse than Peters. And I do agree with you. I think having the veterans stay, he's going to be steady and that kind of stuff. He used to be great. He's not anymore. He's 41. But I think it's more about having a guy in the film room, helping everyone else prepare, being that pro, right? That's what's going to really help them as they wait for their starters to get back.
The same day they signed Greg Island back to the practice squad. Also, Jason Peters is initially on the practice squad, so they'll need to make a game day decision on him, whether he is activated up. We'll see what happens with this move now, putting Abe Lucas onto IR. Maybe that's the spot that they needed to bring him up. What they did, though, today was a little surprising, but given the depth situation, they really needed to go out and do this. They signed tackle Roquan O'Neal off of Tampa Bay's practice squad, which means he lands onto the 53, and he may not be active for game day, but he's on the active roster. Mm-hmm. And then also tackle McClendon Curtis off Las Vegas's practice squad. O'Neal went undrafted out of UCLA, was kind of a Rutgers transfer over there, started all 13 games for UCLA last season, blocking for Zach Charbonnet, and Bobo was his teammate as well. So I'm sure those guys vouched for him. Apparently, Tampa Bay really liked this guy. They were happy to get him back onto the practice squad. He's one of the best young up and coming tackles out there that's currently wasn't on a roster. So Seattle was able to kind of swoop in and get him. And then Curtis was a undrafted free agent, started 38 games at Tennessee Chattanooga. Don't know much else about him. The other guy out there that I'll just mention is Lael Collins. The Bengals released him off of the PUP list, excuse me. He's injured. He injured his ACL last week, second to last week of December last year. So he is still in a recovery mode. But that might be something to monitor if this thing goes longer than anticipated for the Seahawks, especially for Charles Cross.
Yeah, if he
we'll
gets
see.
if he gets himself where he can pass the physical and be cleared to play, that's a name, because that was a pretty good player. And so if they can get him and sign a guy like that for nothing once he's healthy, that would be a huge boost if Cross or Lucas aren't able to come back.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really the bad news, and it is very bad news. You know, without our left tackles and right tackle in this offense, we're going to see just how much of this offense we can actually run, and a good test will be against the Lions. Witherspoon is coming back. Pete Carroll confirmed today that Witherspoon is in fact going to play on Sunday. He called it his opener. So he will be out there. That's good news for the secondary that really struggled. We're going to get into that a little bit today, as far as what went wrong last week and why we're having this conversation, as far as losing to the Rams as badly as we did. We were outscored 23-0 in the second half after taking a 13-7 lead. Seattle was 2 of 9 on their own third down conversions, and then watched Matthew Stafford and the Rams convert 11 of 17 third downs when they had the ball, and including some long drives that really kind of fatigued that defense and compounded some of the scheme and coverage issues that they had. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you kind of want to approach this conversation, Keith?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that went wrong with the defense, and I think we kind of just need to walk through them independently. I mean, we mentioned it when we talked to post game that the pass rush just wasn't consistent enough. When they got pressure, Stafford didn't complete passes. They just didn't get pressure often enough, and they need to fix that. They need to be able to get consistent pressure. Mix up a little things. They just ran their they're playing a 3-4, so it alternates on which outside linebacker blitzes, but they just rushed straight ahead so often. There wasn't a lot of stunts, a lot of twists. There wasn't a lot of disguise in anything that they did, and it just wasn't effective. They needed to be a little more creative in getting pressure on Stafford.
Can I stop you?
And I think that would have definitely helped. What?
So I'm looking for your opinion. I'm not necessarily looking for a solidified answer, because I don't know if there is one. But this seems like a complete broken record to me. Like at least 3 years in a row, if not slightly longer, opening up the season with disappointing defensive performances and scheme issues and rushing the passer, even though we've got a plethora of options in that area, and having our defense, especially our defensive backs, and we were kind of thinking on paper anyway, these guys were going to be top 5 unit in the NFL potentially, and to have them out schemed, outflanked, outplayed, allowing tons of receptions and cushions in front of them. I'm really curious as to what you think based on the all 22 stuff, like what happened in the secondary too.
Well, okay. So when we start talking about the secondary, part of the issue is a couple of individually bad performances. Kobe Bryant and Trey Brown need to be called out. Both of them played really soft. They were slow. When you're in a zone, you've got to be quick to react. You've got to pick up guys as they come through your zone. And both of them played really soft, off of guys, slow to react. And they were picked on. Like those were the guys that got thrown at over and over again.
I have a question for you on Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
So was he operating more out of the nickel, or was he kind of a too high safety dropping down into a robber coverage in the middle?
He was more operating in the nickel, but it was more of because they were playing a lot of zone. He ended up with a he wasn't a deep safety in the zone. He was more of an underneath safety. That's where his responsibilities were. And yeah, there's just a lot of guys that would run right across his face and get open. And the ball would be completed to him, and then he'd react, and it just wasn't quick enough. I don't know. For him, it struggled.
Do you have any
Trey Brown
examples that you wanted to bring up?
Not really, because I think it would be better if we actually had, if we're going to talk about individual plays, having like game footage up would be a little better. And we can't.
And
really
maybe we
that.
can do that later on in the season. We have the ability to do it. It's just a lot of legwork to do it.
Yeah. But there was a lot of that, and then Trey Brown had the same thing, just like a lot of stuff where guys would come in on a square in, and Trey Brown would bail out as if the player was running a post, and it just created a lot of space right in the middle, right in front of him, for Stafford to complete the pass. And they need to be more physical and up tighter and actually mirroring what the receivers are doing, and they weren't. And that was a big chunk of it. Diggs had a couple of bad plays. Julian Love had a couple of bad plays. Rick Wallen
and Matthew Stafford had a great game.
He did. He had a fantastic. He put some balls on guys in the smallest windows. Like there was one pass that was completed on Mike Jackson when he was in there that I'm telling you, like, I don't know how he fit that ball in there. It was like on the outside, 30 yards away from him. And it was just a perfectly thrown ball. And you just like, okay, at some point, great throw, great catch is going to beat good coverage. He did
the same thing with Matthew Stafford threw the ball to Tyler Higbee on one play. He was just completely covered. In fact, Jordan Brooks was in front of the coverage and just missed the hand swipe on the ball. I know which
play you're talking about. Yeah, and that was just, I mean, he just rifled that ball in there. Yeah. And it worked. There is also another thing that we need to keep an eye on, and that might be the speed of a certain middle linebacker who we are very excited to have back in Seattle. I don't know if you remember it, but there was a play where Stafford actually ran
18 tackles.
I know. Stafford ran around him for a first down. Yeah. He stepped up, should have had the play stopped about 5 yards, and instead an old, slow Matthew Stafford ran around him and got a first down. That was scary. It had 18 tackles, had a pretty good game, but the lack of speed on a couple of plays in coverage, and that one in particular, which wasn't a coverage, that was a, step up and tackle the quarterback situation, had me worried.
And maybe he was out of position, got awkward, and
yeah, I mean, we don't know.
Couldn't make the angle.
It was one play. So I'm not going to.
He did have 7 of his 9 solo tackles were for 2 yards or less.
Yeah, that is one thing against the run. He is so good. He attacks downfield. He reads the play really well. He gets through traffic as good as anyone.
The largest rush for the Rams on the day was Kyren Williams rushing for 9 yards. Everything else was in front. They averaged like 3.2 yards a carry or something like that. It really wasn't. It wasn't the difference in the game. Well, let's just put it that way, which is a great, actually. One of the things that you could take away that was positive on the defense was the way that they played the run.
Yeah, the run defense was good. The pass defense was not, and that's kind of the opposite of what we expected coming in, because, well, we expected the secondary to be better, but both safeties had, some off plays and some struggles, and yeah, I mean, it's.
So let me ask you this. So after watching that all 22, really kind of seeing it bird's eye, did you get a sense, a feeling that this was, now I know the players need to execute. Don't get me wrong. Did you get the sense that this was somewhat schematic in the way that the Seahawks what they were asking their players to do as far as being in a position to make plays or not being in a position to make plays?
Okay. So, as far as the pass rush, I think it was schematic. As far as the coverage, it looked more like execution. Guys that just, whether it was miscommunication or just not, not covering the route as it's run. They're covering the route that they think is going to be run, and that leaves the guy open, and stuff like that. So, and some of it was well designed by Sean McVay to take advantage of the zones and that kind of stuff.
So talk to me a little bit about the nuance of schematic versus, player playing, as far as the defensive line is concerned.
Oh, okay. With the defensive line. So like, this is what I was saying earlier. They rushed straight forward with 4 guys over and over and over again. There wasn't a lot of stunts. There wasn't a lot of twists. There wasn't a lot of
I saw Bobby
packages.
fall down on one twist.
Yeah. Well, it's not a twist if it's Bobby coming up, because that's
okay, stunt. but he was coming up and he was trying to look like Jaron Reed kind of came back around towards the inside shoulder of the tackle, and Bobby kind of filled that gap. And so he was blitzing on the play.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of but he tripped and didn't have an opportunity to make the affect the play, and they converted on one of the third downs.
Yep.
So the way the thing that I saw on these third down conversions, which we really struggled on, is it was a mix of different things. But
it was.
Hats off to the Rams for executing, because they beat us in a variety of ways. It wasn't just one thing over and over and over and over again. Although they did attack, the middle of the field and so forth. The thing that was striking to me was that Matthew Stafford just had a hell of a game. That's kind of what stood out to me the most, in a sense, in that
he's a good player.
He got the ball into tight windows. A couple of his younger players stepped up for him. Tutu Atwell. Really, if you go back and look at his 3-year career, it has been a mixed bag for sure. And he had his best game this last game. You look at the rookie, which, hats off to that kid. But he had a heck of a game and just stepped up. And you combine that with Seattle's, for whatever reason, and I don't know why they start seasons like this, but this is like the 3rd or 4th season in a row where Pete Carroll is shocked, at the end of the game, and says, I don't know what happened. This wasn't the way that we drew it up and wanted to come out and play. And it just didn't happen for us, and he talked about, combined weakness at the pass rush and allowing too many plays, in front for yards, where they expected to have more bat downs, pass defense, interceptions, knocked out footballs. None of that happened. We were just too far away from the ball to make any plays on the ball. We didn't have any pass defense in this game.
They were really slow to react to a lot of what the Rams were doing.
And I don't get it, Keith. I honestly, I don't. I mean, they had a ton of time to prepare for this game. We've got this vaunted pass defense, apparently, that everyone's just been raving about in camp, and you go lay an egg like this in the first game. It's the disconnect to me is pretty strange.
Yeah, it is concerning. This has been a thing. Now, we thought it was going to go away when they changed defensive coordinators, and that it was just a product of designing stuff that didn't fit the talent, and then having to make adjustments later. But now we've got a new defensive coaching staff, and we're running into similar problems where at the beginning of the season, it just feels like they don't know how to use the guys they have, and it takes time for them to develop. So,
right.
It's frustrating. It really is frustrating.
Because these guys are talented. They went through the entire camp, and all you heard about all camp was the plays that they were making against DK Metcalf and the battles that they were having with Tyler Lockett and Jigba. Now, they were winning some of those, but also our guys were coming up and batting balls down and contesting catches. And I realize it's practice, it's different. But nonetheless, we're familiar with this offense we just faced. It's our offense. Now, it's maybe better executed, but it was our offense.
It is supposed to
with
be.
lesser, apparently, quote unquote, lesser receivers. So it is frustrating. I can understand why everyone's frustrated. All the fans out there are frustrated and so forth. The expectations were set. Pete Carroll set the expectations. This is going to be a special season. This could be a special. And I think, people were buying into that. So it's tough. Okay.
It might be special in a different way if they don't right the ship defensively.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the Lions preview in the next show in more detail. But what do the Seahawks, based on what you saw on the All-22 on the defensive side? I think the offense is going to end up correcting itself, maybe, depending on the tackle situations. Right. So I'm actually less worried about the offense long term, but the defense, to me, something's wrong, I think, with the scheme and the way it's coached and what they're asking the players to do. Other teams have us completely figured out. Now, Pete Carroll has a long-standing philosophy. Everyone knows this, that he doesn't want anything over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's playing his own. And as long as you're reading and reacting and you've got great linebackers and maybe a great strong safety, that zone in front, while you might allow 3 or 4 yards for a catch, it's going to be contested and it's going to be hard fought, and you're going to get that other team to make a mistake and not convert on third down, and you're going to get them to punt.
But
over and over for
there was
seasons
part of the problem.
Now. Yeah,
there was happening. Part of the problem is that area in front, instead of those short receptions in the middle, being caught at 4 yards and being tackled at 5 or 6, we're being caught at 7 or 8 yards and being tackled for 11 or 12. Jordan Brooks
over and over again.
Yes, we need to point out Jordan Brooks, who played pretty well in this game, but also struggled. And you had a bunch of guys who had been injured and hadn't practiced much as a group out there. You're
going to have a new one entering the fray this weekend.
Yeah, with Witherspoon. And I think it showed a little bit in some miscommunication and some guys that just were, making mistakes that you see early in training camp. I wondered if having Brooks out there was the right call, given the fact that Devin Bush had played pretty well.
One of the things I did want to ask you was about the diversity that we've got in our defensive backfield. We've got, a left corner and a right corner, starter wise. But then you've got Trey Brown, you've got Kobe Bryant, you've got Julian Love, you've got Artie Burns, a few others that can play multiple positions. And my question to you is that multiple position issue what is going on here? Whereas these guys are trained to play all over the place, but maybe not communicating and not playing one position very, very well.
I don't know. These guys are trained to play all over the place, which means they know not just what their responsibilities are, but what other people's responsibilities are. You'd think that would help them. But I know I can depend on my guy to be there, and I know he's going to be there because if I was playing, that's what my responsibility on this play would be. Usually that knowledge helps. It doesn't hurt. And so I don't know. There was a lot more rotation on this game than you would normally see in the defensive backfield. You saw Mike Jackson in there. You saw Artie Burns in there. You saw Trey Brown and Requel, and all those guys got playing time. So did Kobe Bryant and the 2 starting safeties. Mm-hmm. They played a lot of guys. They rotated a lot of guys in and out, and not because of injury or anything. And it looked like they were at one point kind of throwing stuff out there to see if something would stick. I didn't like that look, and I hope that they'd have it figured out by now. It also might have just been the defense was on the field a lot and guys were just freaking exhausted. That might also be the other part.
I'm really looking forward to Witherspoon. He's going to make a few mistakes here and there, but he is so physical, and his attitude is much needed on this field. Just not going to allow teams to control that middle of the field. He's not going to allow that. We need that kind of mentality. I will say this, that, Detroit runs a very similar offense as the Rams, only better. Jared Goff is, as much as we ridiculed and mocked him when he was with the Rams in the prior 4 or 5 seasons, in the last 2 or 3 that he's been with the Lions, he's really become quite competent thrower in the NFL. It doesn't turn the ball over, doesn't make mistakes. He knows how he's the perfect game manager quarterback that you'd like to have, where you're trying to control the clock and eke out wins. And he's really good at that. And so, marching down the field, getting the third down conversions, all that stuff, that's what the Lions are built for. They've got a couple of great running backs now to be able to help them with that. We'll get into it, when we preview the Lions, but it's an uphill battle. It was going to be an uphill battle before our tackles went out, and now I'm just not sure. I think that we might need a little help somewhere from something to win this game, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I really think it is. I mean, Goff is not, no one's going to mistake him for, Aaron Rodgers, but pre-ankle injury, or, Peyton Manning in the day, or that kind of thing. He's not that, but he can be steady, and he can complete passes underneath and take what the defense gives him. And, against the Rams, the Seahawks gave Matthew Stafford a lot. So we'll see. He also doesn't have the arm that Matthew Stafford has. He doesn't have that cannon. And so some of those plays that were made by the Rams aren't going to be available by the Lions. So we'll see how it ends up. Plus, I think the team will respond and be better.
Yeah, I hope so. All right, let's get out of here. Yeah. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find it on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. And when you do hit that subscribe button, that would be awesome. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.